She thought you were just hurt. She thought that your silence was a reaction, an emotional response that would eventually fade. She expected you to text her, to reach out again, to try and explain yourself or fix things. She imagined you'd come back with questions, with apologies, maybe even with hope. She thought this silence was just a phase, a temporary break, a way to get her attention. But what she never understood was this. This silence was not a pause. It wasn't a momentary retreat to gather your thoughts. It wasn't a strategic move to play the game. It was something deeper. It was a goodbye. But not the kind of goodbye she expected. Not the kind filled with words, emotions, or confrontation. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was an end that didn't need to be loud or messy or dramatic. Just nothing. And that nothing said everything. Because you didn't go silent to wait for her to notice. You didn't go silent to make her feel bad. You went silent because you needed space to heal, to rebuild the parts of you that got lost in the noise, to remember who you were before you ever needed to beg for love, for validation, for reassurance. And that's what's so powerful about this silence. It's not just you being quiet. It's you choosing yourself, choosing your peace, choosing your own worth. When a man truly goes quiet, he does so because he has realized something. He has realized that silence is not weakness. It's not the absence of courage or the absence of strength. It's not a sign that he's defeated or passive. It's the exact opposite. It's power. It's a man deciding that he no longer needs to explain himself to anyone. He doesn't need to seek approval or validation. He doesn't need anyone else to understand him in order to feel whole. He doesn't need to prove that his feelings matter. Because silence, when a man chooses it, is not a game. It's not manipulation. It's a way to reclaim who you are, to set boundaries, and to show that you don't need to fight for what you deserve. You don't need to yell to make your point. You don't need to beg to be seen. You just stand still in your truth, in your peace, and let everything else fall away. And that's what men understand. True strength comes from being at peace with yourself. It's knowing that you are enough, even without anyone else's approval. It's having the courage to stay silent, not because you're afraid, but because you trust that silence will show your true power. This silence doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. It shows that you have learned that your worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion. It shows that you've grown beyond needing constant validation. And it shows that you've realized your own value, regardless of how others respond. She thought you were just avoiding the situation, but you weren't avoiding anything. You were choosing to heal, choosing to grow, choosing to be the man who no longer lets the past control his peace. And when she sees it, when she realizes the strength in your silence, she won't know how to react, because she won't know if she's been left behind, or if you've just outgrown the need to be understood. At first, she brushed it off. She didn't panic. She thought your silence was just part of the usual pattern, that you needed space, maybe a few days to process. She figured you were still checking her stories, still watching, waiting, thinking about what to say, maybe even rehearsing your apology. She thought it was just your pride, that once the emotion settled, you'd come back with a carefully crafted message. She thought you were still emotionally tied to her, just too hurt to talk, too wounded to act normal, too shaken to make the first move. But then the silence stretched. Days turned into weeks, and your silence didn't soften. It didn't break. You didn't reach out late at night when the loneliness hit. You didn't type and delete messages trying to get the words right. You didn't send her a long explanation of your pain, hoping she'd finally understand. You just stayed silent. No check-ins, no signs, no little breadcrumb trail leading her back to you. And that's when the shift began, in her. She started to feel it. Confusion creeping in, because this wasn't how you used to be. This wasn't how she remembered you. You used to be the one who gave her reassurance, even when you were hurting. You used to be the one who kept trying, even when she pulled away. You used to reach, explain, fight for her attention. But this time, you did none of that. You didn't explode in anger. You didn't fall apart online. You didn't try to make her jealous. You didn't react at all. Instead, you became still in a way that said, I'm not waiting anymore. Still in a way that didn't come from sadness, but from strength. You weren't numb. You weren't cold. You were calm, fully present, fully aware, and fully detached. You stopped chasing answers. You stopped needing closure. You stopped performing for someone who made you feel like you had to earn their love. You didn't do it for attention. You didn't do it to get a reaction. You did it because you were finally choosing yourself. And that kind of silence, that powerful, unshakable silence, did something to her. It made her curious. She started checking your profile more than she admitted, started wondering where your energy went. But there was nothing. No signal, no attempt, no trace of the man who used to orbit around her. And that made her nervous, because for the first time, she wasn't sure what you were thinking. She wasn't sure if she still mattered. She wasn't sure if you'd ever return. And then came the unsettling truth. Maybe you were gone for good, because people expect a fight when things fall apart. They expect emotions, tears, anger, noise. They expect you to try, to fix it, to cling, to prove that you still care. But when you give them none of that, when you give them stillness, real stillness, the kind that comes from healing, not from hurting, that's when they feel the loss. Not just the loss of your presence, but the loss of your energy, your attention, your love. You didn't stay quiet because you stopped caring. You stayed quiet because you finally started caring about your mind, about your heart, about your peace. And in that silence, you didn't crumble. You rebuilt. You got focused, disciplined. You cleared the fog. You saw everything for what it really was, not what you wanted it to be. You didn't walk like a man searching for closure. You walked like a man who had found it, not in her words, but in your own silence. She expected to see you broken, bent over by the weight of losing her, but instead, she saw you becoming stronger, smarter, more centered than ever. And that scared her more than anything, because she didn't just lose the man she knew. She lost the chance to ever know the man you've become. She was sure you'd come back swinging, that you'd argue to defend yourself, that you'd try to clear your name, plead your side of the story, demand to be heard. She thought there'd be shouting, emotion, a scene, tears maybe, a heated call, a desperate message in the middle of the night. She imagined you'd show up at her door, not physically maybe, but emotionally, trying to fix what broke, trying to hold on to what was slipping, trying to make her feel the way you used to, important, wanted, needed. Because that's what she was used to. You always tried. You always came back. You always gave her one more chance, even when she didn't ask for it, even when she didn't deserve it. So when you didn't react, not with anger, not with heartbreak, not even with confusion, she didn't know what to make of it. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't argue your case. You didn't show up in her notifications trying to talk things out. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't point fingers. You didn't even flinch. Instead, you did something she never imagined. You gave her silence. Not the cold, punishing kind. Not the silence filled with resentment or fake strength. You gave her calm. Total, steady, unwavering calm. The kind of silence that comes when a man finally gets tired of chaos. The kind that says, I don't need to prove myself anymore. The kind that says, I've already said everything that needed to be said, and you still didn't hear it. She thought you'd chase her. She was sure of it. She thought her leaving would make you run after her, beg her to stay, offer to change. She believed you still needed her validation, her presence, her permission to heal. But you didn't chase, you didn't run, you didn't plead or panic. You walked calmly, without a backward glance. And somewhere in that walk, you slipped right through her fingers. Not with anger, not with noise, just stillness. You gave her distance, you gave her peace, you gave her something she never gave you, space. And in that space, she waited. She told herself you were just licking your wounds. She thought you were counting the days, waiting for the perfect time to reach out. She convinced herself that your silence was temporary, that it was just a break before the next chapter, that you'd be back. But the days kept passing, and you didn't return. There were no check-ins, no "I miss you" texts, no old photos reposted, no signs you were still holding on. And slowly that silence, the same silence she once called ego, the same silence she thought was just pride, became something else. It became heavy, it became loud, it became undeniable. Because it didn't just stay silent, it said something. It told her you're not waiting, you're not hurting in the way she thought you would. You're not out there suffering in silence, hoping she reconsiders. You're not clinging to the past anymore. It told her that you've let go, that your peace is no longer up for negotiation, that you've moved forward. Not because you're angry, not because you want revenge, but because you've finally found clarity. She may not say it out loud, but she feels it, she knows it. She no longer has access to you. She no longer has control over your emotions. She no longer has the version of you who would have done anything to keep her. Because that man, the one who kept giving chances, the one who tried to love her into understanding you, he doesn't live here anymore. You didn't slam the door, you didn't curse her name, you didn't block her out of rage. You just closed the chapter, quietly, completely. And that realization, that final, quiet truth, hits harder than any explosion ever could. Because she wasn't prepared for this kind of silence. Not the silence that screams, not the silence that waits, but the silence that means it. The kind of silence that doesn't seek attention, that doesn't try to prove anything, that doesn't come back. The kind of silence that signals the end, a real end, an unshakable end. And now, she's the one sitting in the echo of what used to be, not because of what you said, but because of everything you didn't. Here's the truth. You had every chance to pour your heart out. You could have written pages trying to explain how deeply it hurt. You could have called her, voice shaking, trying to make her understand the weight she left on your chest. You could have tried to show her the pain she didn't see, the silent nights, the unanswered questions, the confusion that kept you awake. But you didn't, not because you didn't care, not because it didn't hurt, but because you knew it wouldn't matter. She wouldn't have really listened. She might have nodded, but not absorbed it. She might have said, "I understand," but she wouldn't have felt it, because people only hear what they want to hear, and she didn't want to hear your pain. She may have brushed off your honesty like it was too much. She may have acted like it was inconvenient to hold space for you, like you were being dramatic, like you were making it all bigger than it really was. She might have rolled her eyes, not at your words, but at the depth of your emotion, at the fact that you were still feeling something real. She may have told herself you'd get over it, that you were just emotional, sensitive, weak. She may have walked away without flinching, as if she never shared memories with you, as if you were just another moment, another face, another phase, another name on a list. And that's what stung the most. Not just that she left, but how easily she did it, how effortlessly she shut the door behind her like it cost her nothing, like you meant nothing. But you didn't fall into that trap. You didn't argue, you didn't defend yourself, you didn't chase closure or demand understanding or beg for clarity. You did something much more powerful. You went silent, Not the kind of silence that plays games, not the silence of someone who's trying to punish. You gave her real silence, the kind that holds no hate, no guilt, no need for attention, the kind that says, "I've said all I need to say, and I'm done." You didn't try to get her back. You didn't try to make her see your worth. You didn't try to remind her of what she walked away from. You just disappeared, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with peace. You walked away like a man who understood his value, like someone who realized the only approval he needs is his own. And that silence, it did what no long speech ever could. It made her think. It made her wonder. Because you didn't give her closure. You didn't leave her a message to hold on to. You didn't give her the comfort of knowing you still cared. You didn't even give her a reason to believe she still mattered to you. And that lack of explanation, that empty space where your attention used to be, became the loudest thing in her life. She started to doubt, not because you tried to make her feel anything, but because you didn't try at all. Now the questions start circling in her mind. Did he actually move on? Did I misread everything? Was he stronger than I thought? Did I lose something that won't come back? She wanted control. She wanted to be the one who walked away and looked back with pride. She wanted to be remembered, not haunted. She wanted to be in charge of how the story ended. But what she never saw coming was that you would be the one who never turned around, that you wouldn't plead, wouldn't explain, wouldn't try to hold on to what was already gone. And now, the silence you chose, that calm stillness she used to ignore, is what keeps echoing in her thoughts. Because it says everything she doesn't want to believe. It says, "I'm not coming back. I've outgrown this. I found peace without you." And that peace, that stillness, that calm you chose over chaos, it's haunting her more than any goodbye ever could. Because it wasn't spoken, it wasn't shouted, it wasn't forced. It was real and final and free. But let's be honest, you didn't go quiet to make her wonder. You weren't trying to trigger guilt. You didn't fall silent hoping she'd suddenly realize your worth and come chasing after you in regret. You weren't sitting in the dark, crafting some emotional strategy to make her miss you. You weren't playing a game. You went silent for one reason, because you were done. Done explaining yourself to someone who only half listened. Done repeating your truth to ears that filtered out everything real. Done begging to be understood when all you ever gave was honesty. Done shrinking yourself just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You were tired, not just exhausted, drained, not from work, not from life, but from constantly pouring your time, your love, your effort into someone who didn't see you clearly, or worse, chose not to. It wasn't emotional exhaustion. It wasn't mental fatigue. It was something deeper, spiritual tiredness, a kind of weariness that hits the soul when you keep showing up for someone, and they keep walking away like it's nothing. You gave your energy so freely. You tried to keep the connection alive when it was already gasping for breath. You were loyal when it wasn't returned. You loved loudly, fully, deeply, and still felt invisible. So you stopped, not because you gave up, but because you finally understood that you were the one being left behind, and no one even noticed. So you pulled it all back, your attention, your affection, your explanations, your need to be understood. You put down the noise. You stepped away from the drama. You turned inward, not to isolate yourself, but to finally reconnect with the only person who never abandoned you, yourself. And in that stillness, you started to breathe again. Not just small breaths, but full, deep, clean ones. The kind of breath that says, "I'm safe now." The kind that says, "I choose me now." That silence wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was you saying, "I've reached my limit. and I'm choosing peace over performance. I matter enough to walk away from what drains me. I don't need to scream to know my voice has power. And that's what real Stoicism is. Not the fake toughness, not cold detachment, not pretending like you don't care when you actually do. No, real Stoicism is choosing peace when your soul is screaming for war. It's staying calm when your heart wants to explode. It's choosing silence not because you're scared to speak, but because you've already said everything you needed to, and silence now says it louder. You didn't give her the meltdown. You didn't beg for closure. You didn't spiral into a storm of emotion. The world may have expected a reaction. She may have counted on it. Your pain definitely wanted to make noise, to defend itself, to be seen. But your strength whispered something even louder. Not this time. You didn't collapse. You didn't break. You didn't try to burn it all down. You just got quiet. And in that quiet, you stood taller than ever. You realized something that most people never do. You don't need to be heard to be whole. You don't need to be understood to know your own truth. You don't need to convince anyone why you walked away, because you know why. And that knowing, that clarity, that peace, that's not weakness. That's not giving up. That's not indifference. That's power. That's discipline. That's stoicism. That's you choosing stillness in a world that demands you perform. That's you walking away, not because you had nothing left, but because you finally realized you were everything you were waiting for. And now, you're not the same man you used to be, not even close. You didn't just change your habits, you changed your spirit. Your entire posture toward life, love, and pain shifted, and the world didn't see it happen because you didn't announce it. You didn't post about it. You didn't scream, "I'm different now." You just became. Quietly, slowly, deeply, from the inside out. You're becoming dangerous now. But not the kind of dangerous people think of when they hear that word. You're not unpredictable, not impulsive, not wild, not cruel. You're dangerous because you're no longer reactive. You've mastered something that few ever do: emotional control. You don't flinch at disrespect. You don't spiral when someone pulls away. You don't lose sleep over opinions that don't align with your truth. You don't raise your voice just to feel heard. You don't plead to be seen by someone who's blind to your worth. You don't hand out explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply observe. You breathe. You feel it all, without being consumed by any of it. And then you choose peace. You don't chase people who run. You don't try to resuscitate dead connections. You don't keep showing up where you're not valued, because you've realized something essential. Your energy is sacred. You've stopped giving it away to chaos, confusion, or desperation. You no longer see silence as weakness. You see it as wisdom. You no longer see detachment as indifference. You see it as survival. You don't look back anymore, not because you don't feel, but because you finally value your peace more than proving your point. You've stopped needing to be right. You've stopped needing to be heard. You've stopped needing to be chosen by anyone, because you chose yourself. And that's where your power lives now, in the pause, in the stillness, in the restraint. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to explain every boundary. You don't need to show up for every emotional fire, because you've learned that real strength, unshakable strength, is in knowing when to walk away. Not with rage, but with composure. Your calm is now your power. Your silence is your protection. Your discipline is your edge. And your peace? That's your new home. And nothing shakes you when you live from there. People used to know how to push you. Now they're confused, because the man who once reacted doesn't anymore. The man who once needed to be heard is now silent and whole. The man who once chased is now focused and gone. And that energy, that grounded, unfazed, stoic energy, it speaks louder than any words ever could. It's what makes you untouchable, not because you're hardened, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've grown beyond the reach of chaos. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be feared to be respected. You just need to stay calm, hold your line, and walk with the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needs anything from anyone but himself. Let her wonder. Let her sit in the silence she thought was temporary. Let her replay your last words, trying to find a hidden message. Let her scroll through your old texts, rereading the way you once poured your heart out. Let her visit your page and wait for a post that never comes. Something, anything, to tell her you still care. But there's nothing, no updates, no signs, no signals that she still lives in your mind. Because that version of you, the one who waited by the phone, the one who questioned his worth every time she pulled away, the one who held on to hope like it was the only thing keeping him alive, he's gone. You didn't just walk away. You buried him. You laid to rest the man who kept explaining himself to someone who never truly listened, the man who begged to be loved in the way he gave love, the man who kept showing up, loyal, vulnerable, sincere, even when he was invisible, even when it broke him, even when it hollowed him out. And in that silence, that deep, painful, transforming silence, you built someone new, not louder, not harsher, but stronger. Stronger in how you carry yourself, stronger in how you set your boundaries, stronger in how you no longer settle for being halfway seen. Sharper, not with anger, but with truth. You see things clearly now. You no longer confuse attention with affection or presence with purpose. And yes, you're colder. But not because you've turned off your heart, not because you've lost your ability to feel. You're colder because you've finally learned to protect your warmth, because you've finally understood what drains you and what deserves you. You don't seek explanations anymore. You don't lay in bed asking, why wasn't I enough? You don't replay every moment trying to make sense of her distance. You've stopped needing answers from someone who never offered them when it mattered. You no longer need her to say you were valuable. You already know you were, and not because she said it, but because you finally believe it yourself. You've made peace with the silence, with the space, with the ending. You've made peace with the fact that not all people who enter your life are meant to stay. Some come to teach you how much more you were meant to become. You stopped hoping she'd come back and apologize. You stopped waiting for closure wrapped in her words. You realized that the closure you were craving was something only you could give. So you did. You closed the door, quietly, without a speech, without a final message, without a dramatic exit. You just stopped walking in circles and stepped off the path completely. And that door, when it shut, the world didn't hear it. She didn't hear it. But you did. And inside, it echoed like a final chapter finally finished. It was the sound of peace, of self-respect, of rebirth. Now she's the one left wondering. Not because you wanted revenge, not because you were trying to play with her emotions, but because growth always creates distance, and silence always makes people curious. She never thought you'd stay gone. She thought you were just giving her time. She thought you'd reach out eventually. She thought you'd come back once the dust settled. But now the dust has settled, and you're not there. You're not waiting. You're not watching. You're not needing her to make anything right. Because you already did. You made it right when you chose peace over chaos. When you let go of who you were just to hold on to who you could become. You made it right by walking away from where you were not valued and building a life where you no longer need permission to feel whole. You didn't become bitter. You became better. You didn't grow cold. You grew clear. And now, the man who once needed her to understand no longer needs her at all. That's what she never expected. Not just the silence, but the fact that it never broke, never wavered, never softened. She thought it was temporary, a pause between chapters, a little quiet before you returned with your usual consistency. The late-night message, the just checking in, the apology she never earned but always received. She thought you were just catching your breath, that you needed a little space to calm down, that once the hurt settled, you'd come back, just like you always did. But that moment she thought was just a brief silence, turned into something permanent, unshakable. Because this time it wasn't a pause, it was an exit, and not a dramatic one, not loud, not bitter. There were no breadcrumbs left behind, no just-in-case messages, no signs you were waiting in the background, no vague posts for her to overanalyze. You didn't leave the door open a crack. You didn't stay halfway in, halfway out. You left, fully, cleanly, quietly, and not to make a statement, not to manipulate her emotions, but because you were finally done playing a role in a story that kept hurting you. Now, she feels the shift, not all at once, but slowly, like a weight growing heavier every day. She notices the absence of your presence. The warmth of your attention is gone. The patience you once gave so freely is no longer there. The effort, the checking in, the support, the care, it's all vanished. And for the first time, she realizes it wasn't small, it wasn't routine, it wasn't something she could replace, because it wasn't just about losing a man. She lost you. She lost the man who loved even when he wasn't being loved back, the man who stayed when it would have been easier to walk, the man who forgave, explained, held on and believed, the man who showed up even when he was hurting. And now she knows that version of you doesn't exist anymore because you buried him. You didn't just walk away from her, you walked away from the version of yourself that tolerated being unseen, unheard, and undervalued. You're not bitter. You don't wish her pain. You're not hoping she suffers the way you did. You're just free. Free from chasing someone who kept running. Free from the need to explain feelings that were never understood. Free from trying to prove you were enough. Free from needing to be chosen by someone who never made you feel chosen in the first place. You're no longer stuck in that same exhausting loop. Argue, apologize, wait, repeat. You're not hoping she reaches out. You're not watching her page. You're not sitting in the shadows wondering if she regrets it. You're just done. Done trying to revive something that never valued your breath. Done trying to fix something that kept breaking you. Done rewriting a story that was never meant to last beyond its season. You've outgrown the pain. It used to keep you up at night. Now it feels like a distant memory. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you've healed beyond the need to hold on to it. You've outgrown the past. Outgrown the part of you that used to beg for clarity, for closure, for one more chance. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to her, not to yourself, not to anyone. And now you're just living, not waiting, not performing, not hoping. You're silent because your peace speaks for you. You're strong because your self-control is unshakable. You're free because you finally let go of what never truly held you. You've become the man who doesn't need to return because he finally arrived, home in himself. So keep walking, even if the world stays silent, even if the people who once cheered you on have disappeared, even if she never turns around to see what you've become. Keep walking anyway, because this path you're on, it's not for them, it's not for her, it's for you. Even if no one claps, even if no one acknowledges your growth, your effort, your healing, keep going, because every step you take is a victory no one else has to understand. You don't need an audience. You don't need applause. You don't need validation to know you're rising. The progress you're making in silence is louder than the noise they expect from you. Keep building, piece by piece, day by day, brick by quiet brick. Build the life that once felt out of reach, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove to yourself that they were never right about you. You were never broken. You were never weak. You were never less than. You were just buried, under pain, under doubt, under the weight of trying to be enough for someone who couldn't even see you. And now you're uncovering who you really are. You're not rebuilding to get revenge. You're not leveling up to make her regret. You're rising because you finally remembered who you were before you lost yourself trying to be everything for everyone else. So, keep growing in silence. Let your peace speak louder than your pain ever did. Let your progress whisper what your words used to scream. Let your stillness hold the weight your voice no longer carries. You don't need to explain anymore. You don't need to justify the distance, the boundaries, the silence. Because in that silence, you found something the world rarely gives, something she never gave. You found you, the real you, not the anxious one, not the people pleaser, not the version of you constantly trying to be enough. You found the steady you, the one who doesn't react to every trigger, the one who no longer feels the need to chase, the one who doesn't beg to be understood because he finally understands himself. You found the focused you, the grounded, clear-eyed, unshaken version of you that doesn't need to be chosen anymore, because he already chose himself. That version of you, that man is powerful. That man doesn't need a goodbye. He is the goodbye. You didn't need her to say it was over. You ended it the moment you stopped living for her approval. You didn't need her to regret it, because you're too far gone to look back. That quiet strength, that inner peace, that calm confidence. It's louder than anything she could have said. It's stronger than any message she never sent. It's heavier than any apology she never gave. So don't stop now. Keep moving forward. Keep building what was meant for you. Keep healing in silence. Keep becoming in peace. You're not just recovering, you're transforming. And you're doing it without noise, without drama, without needing to prove it. Quiet, still, unstoppable. This isn't the part where you look back. This is the part where you rise so far above what broke you that even if she did look back, she wouldn't recognize the man you've become. If this message stirred something in you, if it made your chest feel lighter, if it made you sit up a little straighter, if it made your breath come deeper and your eyes see clearer, don't keep it to yourself, because there's someone else out there, another man, a brother, sitting in the same silence you once sat in, drowning in thoughts he can't say out loud, wrestling with emotions he's been told to hide, feeling like he's alone in his struggle. He's questioning his worth, replaying every moment, wondering if walking away makes him weak, or if staying silent makes him invisible. Share this with him. Reach him, remind him that he's not broken, he's transforming, he's not lost, he's awakening, he's not falling apart, he's falling into place, finally. And if you're that man, if you've had enough of the noise, if you're tired of the weight you've been carrying, if you're ready to rise without explaining, to grow without being seen, to hold your power quietly, to walk with presence instead of panic, then this is your moment. Don't wait for the world to notice you. Don't wait for her to understand. Don't wait for permission to begin. You don't need to make a scene to make a shift. You don't need to scream to be powerful. You just need to decide, right now, that your peace matters more than your pain. So if you're ready, truly ready, to let go of needing to be chosen, to stop chasing what was never meant to stay, to reclaim the strength you forgot you had, comment below, "Calm is my power." Say it for the man you were. Say it for the man you're becoming. Say it so another man can see your words and realize he's not alone. This moment, it's not just a caption, it's a turning point. This is the moment where silence becomes strength, where pain becomes fuel, where the chapter closes, not because you were pushed away, but because you finally chose to walk forward. Stay silent, stay focused, stay grounded, stay stoic, because the version of you she knew, the one who waited, chased, hoped, He's gone. She didn't think you'd stay quiet forever. She thought you were just giving her time. She thought eventually you'd come back around. But you didn't. And now, she'll never forget that you didn't. Because real power isn't in the return, it's in the refusal. The calm refusal to be pulled back into what once broke you. And that kind of power, that kind of silence, it echoes forever.